today's reality check. Working in the DMV, we're super used to those TLAs. Yes. You know what a TLA is, right?
Today I learned.
No, it's a 3-letter acronym. 3-letter acronyms. But the reality is not everybody knows what those are. And in today's reality check, we're going to help everyone out with a little verbal cheat sheet, podcast style, of course. And we're going to have stories or two mixed in.
Perhaps. A story.
So let's dig on into all these real estate terminologies that you are going to hear if you are buying, selling, or otherwise looking at homes.
Yeah, and this is just scratching the tip of the iceberg.
And these are like the 41 words you need to know. There's probably 141 words you need to know, but these are the things that are going to pop up.
The basics.
Yeah.
All right, so do you want to start with home ownership and like all of the different types that there are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go there.
All right, so let's start out with fee simple. That's probably one that people have heard before, but what the heck does it actually mean, Jamie?
Well, let's back up one sec.
Okay.
What is a homeownership type? What do we mean when we're saying that?
We got to take it even further.
Yeah. Let's back it up a little bit. So when you're buying a property, right? We have to explain to you, well, sometimes we ask what kind of home do you want to own? Like, how do you want to own it?
Well, and a lot of people look at you like, what does that actually mean?
I don't understand. And so we have to talk about these homeownership types. So now let's start off. Fee simple.
Yes. So fee simple, you own it from corner to corner.
You own it. Yeah.
It's all yours. You are responsible for everything.
And that includes the land it sits on.
And the property.
The property, the structure, if you have a survey done, it's everything within that survey boundary. Also down X number of feet, although I don't recall how deep it is.
I feel like that's one of those things you learn in real estate school.
Yeah. It's like, because then you get into mineral rights and air rights and stuff like that. But basically you own this whole area of around that piece of land. That is fee simple. Condo. So what I always say to people is you own from the drywall in.
Pretty much the same thing I say. Yeah. Walls in are yours.
Walls in. You also own from the pipe stem in. So, but let's back up and talk a little bit about condos. So the assumption is a lot of people assume that condos are what? Like, what do they look like?
Little apartments usually.
So they assume that they're apartments, but did you know that condos can be, ready for this? Single family homes, townhomes, or apartments. So a condo is an ownership type. It is not what the structure looks like. At all. Now, often, the reason people get confused is because sometimes there's a lot of condos that are also apartment style looking. So people just assume that that's what a condo means. That is not what a condo means. So you own that drywall in. You own from the pipe stem in. So if there is a plumbing stack that runs up and down from floor to floor and you have units stacked on top of each other, as soon as the pipe breaks into your unit, you own from this break in.
So you want to hope it doesn't
You don't
leak
own
on
this.
That side.
Yeah. You don't own this. The common element owns this, right? And that's the condo association, right? You are responsible for all the interior stuff, but you have no exterior maintenance typically.
Yeah.
Windows are sometimes debatable. It depends on,
I'm sure you run into each individual association and how they structure all that fun stuff. But if you don't want to mow lawns and have to deal with, weeds and planting flowers and all that fun stuff, this might be a good type of home ownership for you.
Unless, of course, you buy a condo that has it's townhouse style with a yard with a fence around it, and then you would be responsible for the yard
with a little
fence.
tiny
Yes.
So that's where you should talk to your realtor so they can guide you.
So we can tell you what's going on. Then what do we got?
Well, next we have co-ops, and I know that you have some experience
Oh my God, co-ops. Co-ops. So a co-op is a really interesting thing. And to remind people, we're talking about things in the DC Metro, the DMV. Now, all these ownership structures are everywhere, but these are the three most common things in our area.
Yes.
New York City, if you're from New York, you know co-ops.
Very well.
They're all over the place. Down here, they're not as common. In a co-op, you own from the paint end. So you don't own the drywall. You just own the paint. You own the layer of paint, whatever color you want that layer of paint to be.
It's yours.
Yeah, that's yours. You basically own the airspace. And you own the cabinets. So the kitchen cabinets are yours. The plumbing is not yours. Now, this is where it can get a little debatable.
It gets a little funky with the actual...
It gets a little funky with co-ops. For the most part, they will repair all things, almost like it's an apartment. But if you replace the toilet, and that's your toilet that you put in, and your toilet leaks, they may or may not repair it. Like, it's kind of, there's some gray area there. Mm-hmm. And that's all defined in the rules that you get. But it is real estate that's owned by an association in which you are given the exclusive right to a specific unit. So I kind of tell people it's like you own the right to live there.
Yes.
You're buying the airspace. You know, you have bought into it. So you are an owner, but you're an owner in this whole like entity, and they've assigned you this airspace.
You have a share of that piece.
Yes. Yes. So it can appreciate. I mean, you know, just like anything else.
It's really interesting what you see with prices with co-ops, though.
Yes. So what you'll see with a co-op is that the prices will be very low, but your monthly fees are very high because you aren't maintaining anything, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's the opposite with a condo. That's not to say that they're super low, but with a condo, your sales price will be higher, but your monthly maintenance fee will be lower than it is in a co-op.
Definitely.
Just because of those maintenance fees. Then we get into weird ownership types.
Oh, yeah. Like there's this one that I got to research not too long ago, really frequently, ground rent.
Oh, yes.
I had a friend who was interested in a property in Baltimore, and while I had no intentions of representing him, I still wanted to learn a little bit in the process about it. And it's fascinating because you essentially, in this area where there are a lot of row homes that there are ground rate situations, you own the actual house, but not the land that it sits on.
Right. So it's very strange. So you do buy the house.
Yeah.
You buy it.
And it's yours.
It's yours, but you got to keep paying the ground rent forever.
But there are ways where I've recently learned that you can actually buy it out if they can't track back to whoever owns the land.
Oh.
Which is very common, I hear, in certain areas.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
interesting. And
it
actually involves posting a sign in your window.
Yeah.
For a certain amount of days. We're making it really old school.
Oh, wow. That's
fascinating.
That is fascinating. We don't run into that a lot around here.
No, thankfully.
However, land lease, which is similar but not the same, it's common for mobile homes. So again, you may own the structure of the mobile home now, right? You could technically take that home with you.
Go anywhere, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. My husband actually grew up. His father used to build power plants.
Okay.
And he grew up out west. And because they would move to like little tiny towns where they didn't have an infrastructure to support all these workers coming in, so everybody brought their homes
on
with
wheels.
them.
Yeah.
So we kind of joked that my husband had his same bedroom for a long time, but he lived in many different places.
That's actually, I mean, you don't have to pack up and move.
Right?
It's kind of nice.
It is. Just put away the breakables. But so if you ever see something like a mobile home or something like that, and you're like, oh, this is great. This mobile home was only $60,000. Yes.
There's a ...
There's a ... There's a land lease. And not only that, it's not necessarily easy to get into those land leases.
It's a little pricey too.
And we should have mentioned that land leases also go with co-ops. So in addition to the co-op fee and all that, often there's an underlying land lease. Sometimes that's tied into the fee, and sometimes that's a separate lease.
Oh,
because
there's a fun situation in our area regarding that.
Oh my God, yeah, River Place.
Yeah,
right?
The land lease ends in.
I think it's now
28 years,
something like that.
Yeah.
So, and that's been a 100-year lease.
Yeah.
So we're kind of curious to see what's going to happen with that. I did ran into the HOA president. We had a very long conversation.
That'll be
about
another episode.
Yes. But it's just interesting that, so there's these things, and then you have to apply for a mortgage on that lease sometimes, or at least some sort of loan. So yes, you could qualify, you could have $40,000 to buy the mobile home, but now you need to qualify for the land lease. And that's an application process. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy to get. What else we got here?
Well, we have fractional, which thankfully.
Fractional is really when like you and a bunch of people just want to go in and buy a property together.
Let's do it.
Or it could be where you're buying like a share of a property. It's different than a timeshare, and we'll talk about that. But this is a lot of times it's commercial buildings, or it's not necessarily like a single family home. It could be like maybe short-term rental properties that people want to co-own and stuff like that. But
yeah, I've seen some like in the beach communities where you can do like a fractional situation where you have 3 months out of the year.
Well, yeah, and that starts getting a little more into timeshare stuff, but
it totes the line.
Yeah, it does. It does. What I find fractional to be a little bit more like, and not only that, but you own a share. So when you buy it, you may own 25% of it, and you can sell that 25% of it to somebody else. So if you wanted to get out of that investment and let somebody come in, so that's an option. It exists around here. It's not necessarily easy to find. That's more of a word on the street type thing, but they're around. But then timeshares.
Timeshare. Well, I think everyone's heard of timeshares, right?
Everyone.
Have you been to a pitch before?
Have you been to a pitch? Let me just tell you, don't buy a timeshare.
They sound great on the surface. It really does. Like, force yourself to go on vacation every year.
Yeah, just really don't. If you are using them religiously, I think they're good. But I've heard way too many people that have just these horrible stories of having to pay these maintenance fees every year. They can't get to use them because airfare is too expensive or whatnot, or they can't get time away, or they have family issues. Sometimes you can sell that time to people. It depends.
For pennies on the dollar, though, from what I've heard.
And to sell your actual timeshare itself is nearly impossible. It's like, take my timeshare for $100, and then you can get rid of it.
Please just take my fees so that I don't have to deal with them.
And that's all you're doing is assigning your fees to somebody else. So there's no appreciation there. You're not earning anything on that. I would almost say if you wanted to do that with a vacation property, that you would go more towards a fractional membership. And then to Stacy's point, you would say, okay, well, I get it 3 months of the year, and whatever. That's a little more casual. You just figure it out. And hopefully you do it with somebody you like, and you can just share it together too,
Please be careful who you buy property with.
Yes, please. Please. But anyhow, so those are the home ownership types. One thing I wanted to mention kind of in with those types, it's not a home ownership type, but it's an overlying thing that we hear a lot about, are HOAs.
All the time.
All the time.
So HOAs, homeowner associations.
Right. Also, I would lump in condo associations, which are different, but similar.
Similar in some ways, yeah.
So they obviously come with condos.
Kind of like the overlord of the area where you're at. They dictate, they have covenants and rules and regulations and architectural guidelines.
They do, and they collect monies on your behalf, and they take care of the common area maintenance. It could be roads. Depending how big the HOA is, it could be like Reston Association, which is gigantic. And not only that, they have what's called clusters within the association.
It's a twofer. You get to pay 2 fees.
So you get 2 fees, right? You get your cluster fee, so that could be your condo or your townhouse.
And then you have the whole big association.
And then you have the big association. Now, the big association has, now I'm trying to remember, do they have 6 pools?
I think it's 6 or 7.
6 or 7 community centers and pools. It's a huge area.
Amenities for what you're paying.
It's like parks and bike trails and all that. It's beautiful. Like, you get what you pay for, but... let's talk about pros and cons of HOAs. Do you like HOAs?
I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with HOAs. I like having, uniformity and like property to an extent. But also, if I want to paint my front door purple, maybe I want to paint my front door purple.
Oddly, my front door is purple.
I had a feeling my front door would be purple.
But obviously, I don't live in an HOA. And I agree. I think that what people overlook with HOAs is it's not so much. There are definitely more restrictive HOAs, and we're talking about the DMV area. We don't run into horribly restrictive HOAs here. I mean, they do have the architectural guidelines, as you said. Mm-hmm. And some of them are like, you have to paint within these palettes, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with. I really don't.
So you'd be okay with no purple door?
I would be okay with no purple door.
You guys heard it first.
But what's nice about it is you also don't have to worry about your next door neighbor having like 3 broken down trucks on blocks in their front yard,
or never mowing their grass,
ever, and
it's like 2 feet tall.
So, I mean, there is some nice things about an HOA, and a really, really bad property next to a home can bring down your property value. It really can. Maybe not on the outside. It's not like your appraised value is going to drop because of it, but it's going to bring down your market value because people aren't going to want to live next to whatever disaster is going on next door. So there is some appreciation for HOAs, and they, as we mentioned, they take care of the common elements, and you get you get amenities. You get pools, you get
playgrounds
and
sorts of stuff.
Tennis courts,
trails,
and stuff like that.
Like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So
so there's some good sprinkled in there,
right.
and I think we probably, being in the industry, have an even more complicated relationship with HOAs.
Yeah, don't get us started on.
We deal with them
resale
frequently.
packages.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so we just went over 7 home ownership types, and we talked about HOAs. So we're up to 8 things right now. So let's move into our next group of words, which would be about the mortgage industry.
Let's talk about money.
Let's talk about money.
Okay, so I hear this one phrase all the time, and before I got in the industry, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew what it meant. And it was just simply a conventional mortgage.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple word, but I honestly didn't know what it meant.
You're like, and here's the thing. I'm the first person to say this. I am not an expert on loans. We know enough to be super dangerous. We can direct our people to talking to the right people and making the best choices and whatnot, and we know what questions to ask. But do not come to me expecting that I know absolutely every nuance about the loans. That's why we have really good trusted lending partners.
I know enough just to get us through the basics, but that's why we partner and work with people in the industry that we know the ins and outs of all of this. We'll stay in our lane, but we have people and the resources to make sure that you get the information you need so you can make an educated decision.
Right. And it is really important to have a great lender who knows all those things. And before we get into these things, the one thing I always talk about with lenders is when you do talk to a lender and you're going over your criteria, you're saying, I want to buy a house in this price range and all that. You have to be like super honest with them. Like tell them everything, bare your soul to them, pretend that they are the person behind the screen and that you are telling them everything about your money situation, not for any other reason than they cannot help you. They cannot do the best for you.
They don't know all the info.
If they don't know all the info.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many times I have clients that come out of left field with like, oh, well, I can get a gift or I can get a loan or not. I say gift and it is a gift, but loan, gift from a family member, or I can get these things. And like, I'm like, oh, you could have mentioned that a little while ago. But, everybody's, a lot of people want to keep everything very close to the vest. We only need information to help you. So please be very upfront with your lenders and your realtors so that we know what's going on.
And be patient with them when they ask you a million questions.
Yeah. So tell us about conventional loans. Now, conventional mortgages.
Well, I was going to say, as VA buyers, the next topic we know
quite
well. But conventional mortgages are basically just a conforming structured loan that is government backed. Pretty commonly we hear.
Well, Fannie Freddie. If it's Fannie Freddie, then it's government backed. Yeah. And it's the normal. It's
the most common type.
It's the most common type of loan. It's also the one where the more money you put down, the better interest rate you can get typically. It's the one where you'll hear people trying to do 10, 15, 20% down. It's not required. You can typically get a conventional mortgage with 3% down. Yep. And but so there's some conforming characteristics to it. Again, we're not going to go down too deep of a path, but just know conventional loan is kind of like the number one easiest thing to get.
Yes.
So now tell us about VA loans, Miss Veteran.
Oh, well, I'm not a veteran. I married one, but
Mrs. Veteran.
Yes. Mrs. Veteran. There we go. So a VA mortgage, it's a great program that is available for our military and veterans and service members, and they allow our veterans and service members to put as little as 0% down on these loans,
which is awesome.
And there's no extra. I want to say extra fees, but there are some fees that do get involved with it, but there isn't what's called PMI, which we're going to talk to a little bit later.
Yep.
So it's a really nice program, and one thing that's really great is the rates are usually very favorable.
The best. They're usually better than conventional and better than FHA.
Yeah, no complaints there.
Yeah.
It's a great program.
So, and VA, and often VA loans are also transferable. Not always, but sometimes they are transferable.
Yeah, we've heard a bit of that. Actually, had my first assumption loan last fall. It was interesting process to navigate.
Yeah, it's not easy. So we said it may be doable. It's not necessarily the easiest
Nor
thing
is
to
it
do.
quick.
No, it's not quick.
But worth it.
It's like 3 months, right? 2-3 months.
Yeah, 3 months.
Yeah.
3 months is where we came in.
So great. So that's for our veterans, and that's how we take care of our veterans, or one of the ways we attempt to take care of our veterans in this country. The third thing we have is FHA loans. So you've heard a lot about these.
Yeah.
So FHA loans are a minimum of 3.5% down.
About 0.5% difference.
0.5% difference. The FHA loans typically are for, and full disclosure, I bought my first 2 homes with FHA loans.
It's a great program, yeah.
So it's not, this is not, don't take this as a derogatory thing. It's for people that may not have 800 credit scores or, super, super high credit scores.
There's a little bit more flexibility with the
A little bit
FHA
more
program,
flexibility on the on your debt to income ratio, and flexibility obviously on that down payment, which is that 3.5%.
Yeah.
And it, you do pay PMI though, so that's your that's the mortgage interest.
That,
Yes, it's a mortgage interest that is a government thing to protect. Yeah, which we'll get into. Sorry. Shh. We'll save the excitement for later.
Very exciting.
Okay. So jumbo loans.
Yeah.
Are next on our list.
So jumbo loans they're just like a conventional loan, right? But they are non-conforming in that they are higher price point.
So one of the things we probably should have mentioned is that these loans are typically capped. So a conventional loan is capped at a certain amount. They come out every year with standards
Different
based
scale,
on areas. And this fluctuates depending where you live. So higher cost of living areas have a higher cap on them. Mm-hmm. And once you exceed that cap, then you have to switch into jumbo loan territory.
Yes.
So usually around here it's like in the 150 or not 150, sorry, 1 million range.
Generally when you get up to that price point
something
when you
like
start
that.
looking at it. And kind of depends on what's going on with the economy as far as whether that is going to be financially beneficial or
sometimes
maybe a little detrimental.
Sometimes it's good and sometimes the interest rate is bad. It just really kind of depends.
It's interesting how they seem to fluctuate a little bit more.
And also with those, it's the amount of the loan, not the amount of the home.
Yes.
So if you're buying a $1.5 million home, but you're putting $500,000 down on it, you can still go into a conventional mortgage here. Again, this area.
Maybe not in Idaho or something, or an area where the price points are much lower.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's jumbo loans.
Fine.
Then next thing we have is my favorite.
It's the best acronym to say.
HELOC. HELOC. What does HELOC mean?
It is a home equity line of credit.
Yes.
What does that actually mean, Jamie? Does it just mean like I have money I can take any time?
It means you have money. So, you're part of the reason why we encourage home ownership is to help build wealth.
Yeah.
How do you build that wealth, right? You create equity in your home by paying down your mortgage and by the fact that the value increases all the time. Mm-hmm. So around here, the values are increasing anywhere from 3 to 5% a year. Lately, even more.
Even more, yeah.
But the average, I never want to overstate, but the average is 3 to 5% a year. So every year, your value is increasing and you're paying down your mortgage balance. Yeah. So that delta that's forming there now is your equity. That equity you can capitalize on. You can take out what's called a home equity line of credit. Your house is considered collateral and it sits in second position on the loan. So your mortgage still is in first position.
And it's always there.
It's always there. And then HELOC sits in second position and you can draw on that line of credit and use it for things.
What can you use it for, Jamie?
You can use it for home improvements. You can use it to buy a new car.
Ooh.
You can, now tax things are different depending what you use it for. So again, not an accountant. Talk to your accountant about this. But but the HELOC itself, you can use it for anything, and you can use it to invest in more
real estate.
Right. So when we talk about building wealth, is using the equity that you have to do that. Don't put yourself in trouble. Don't. One of the things I advise my clients not to do is get into the refinancing whirlpool of refinancing and taking money out all the time.
Oh yes, that can be a very dangerous and slippery slope.
Yeah, using your home as an ATM machine is not necessarily a good thing on that.
Not if you can avoid it, no.
And every time you refinance, you're paying money on those closing costs and fees. So,
and a lot of times they're resetting your loan term, too,
yeah,
right back to 30 years again.
Now, pro tip, you don't have to do it for 30 years.
You don't. Refinance. We refied and went down.
That's what we did, too. We refied and went down. Yeah. So please don't use it as a way to keep milking things. It's not really, in the long run, it's not, all you're doing is paying a lot of money in interest that's just going to keep continuing and continuing.
It will sneak up and get you.
It does, yeah. So our next thing is PITI. It's a PITI.
PITI.
It's PITI.
Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So this is kind of the big major components of what your actual payment is every month with, they didn't include HOAs and condo fees because that's not everywhere.
Right.
But they're the four major components. So the principal of your loan, so like the actual balance that you got a mortgage on.
Which is not going to change. Well, it changes, it goes down. Sorry, your payment principal.
Yes. Not as fast as you'd like it to, but it's right. The interest that you are paying the bank, the taxes that you owe the government and your local jurisdictions, and then of course homeowners insurance, which everybody wants to protect that interest.
And the bank is most likely escrowing your taxes and insurance, and they're paying them on your behalf
every month, which is nice. Yes.
So when you're doing your calculations to figure out what you can borrow, they do factor in that PITI altogether so that it includes your taxes and insurance.
Definitely, yeah.
Because not the government, but the bank does not want you to go delinquent on your taxes. They don't want the government taking their asset.
That's in fact why they do those escrow accounts, to make sure that everybody gets paid.
Exactly. So now another term you probably hear is ARMs.
Yeah, so that's an adjustable rate mortgage. And sometimes you hear that with like a number behind it, right? Or in front of it. So a 5-year ARM or a 7-year ARM. And these can be interesting loans. And basically what that means is you're going to have one interest rate for whatever that term period
Whatever
is.
that first number
is. That 5 or that 7, you're going to have that one rate. And they typically seem to be pretty favorable rates, they usually see. But then what happens after those 5 or 7 years?
Then it goes up really high. Or sometimes it depends how they've structured the loan. So when you heard about what happened back in 2007, 2008.
Wow, back before I was in real estate.
Yeah, true.
Well, I mean,
back housing... before you were in... Yeah, okay, sorry.
I was a married woman, okay? With a house and everything. I was an adult, okay? 2007, I mean, the housing market was bananas. A lot of people were upside down.
It was bananas. But a lot of people, aside from the predatory things that were going on with the lending, a lot of people were doing ARMs.
Yeah, and those were coming up.
And those came due, and it was not pretty. So people bought really expensive homes. Let's just say, I'm making up numbers. Don't try to run these on a calculator. But they're buying a home for $1 million, and they're getting a monthly payment of $3,000 because it's an ARM. Because they're doing this first 5 years at 0.002%, like some ridiculously low rate, or zero. In some cases, they were doing zero ARMs for 5 years. So you were just paying the principal for that 5 years. And then that loan came when the 5 years was over. Then you got slapped with either you had to pay all that interest that had been due, or you had to pay off, in some cases in total, because of how they structured it.
Like a balloon,
Yeah, it was a balloon payment that they were taking a gamble on whether somebody was going to sell the home before they needed to come up with that balloon payment. Wow. So it's people that when the market dropped, they got stuck in these homes that they were now upside down on, and they couldn't do it. So the ARMs are great, but they, it's one of those things. Print.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that I always tell my clients, when they do ARMs, I say, look, I want to just go on record as saying I don't recommend this. You can do what you want. You talk to the lender. You're comfortable with everything, but I just want to go on record as saying I'm not comfortable with ARMs. So yeah.
Yeah, they can be interesting ones.
Yeah. So, but the next thing we have is bridge loans.
Yeah, and I feel like this has been a super common term in our world the last couple of years, especially with lower than what we'd like to see for inventory out there. But a bridge loan is basically a loan that gives you a bridge, hence the name, that allows you without, for example, to sell your current house. It allows you to buy another one. And they basically will like look at the equity that you own in your current home and your entire financial situation and then give you this loan to carry you over.
And it's a short-term thing.
Very short-term, yeah.
Yeah, so
or
basically...
Or you're paying a whole lot in interest, which is not the goal.
You don't want to do that. I mean, the purpose of a bridge loan is really to give you an opportunity to not have to, to allow yourself to get out of your home on your own terms, buy your new property, get moved in, and then put your previous home on the market.
I've had so many clients take advantage of these programs. They're great. Fantastic.
Yeah, my lender has a good one. I'm sure your lender,
most
great programs for that. But again, short term.
Short term, and they're not cheap. No one's going to say that. But when you are faced with a situation where you either can't financially do this, or you just need more,
or in this market, in this market,
it's wild.
You have needed. People are not very. There's no home sale contingencies being accepted right now. So if you need that equity to buy your next home, then you have to come up with a plan B. And that's the plan B.
This is the plan B. It's a great option. So I'm excited now because we get to talk about PMI that we talked about.
She's been dying to talk about PMI.
I mean, I hate PMI, honestly. But
not to be confused with PMS. Totally different.
Also, not to be confused with PITI because there's a lot of P's going on.
A lot of P's.
But PMI is private mortgage insurance, right? So this is for people that are doing a conventional loan, and they are doing less than 20%. Well, it's not just a conventional loan.
It can be FHA too.
FHA is all, not VA though.
Yep.
And they're doing less than 20% down.
Yeah. And it depends. Even sometimes it's less than 15%.
Because I've seen it in some other financial situations too. But it's basically insurance that the borrower is going to be paying extra every month. And it's basically because the bank is taking a little bit in their eyes of a risk because they are accepting less cash up front from you as the borrower. So because of that, you are going to have to pay this extra little insurance fee just so that the bank can insure their property.
Yeah. Which between me, you, and the fence post, I think is a bunch of bullshit.
It's kind of crazy too.
Because there's a lot of fees that get wrapped up in here to protect the lender who's giving you this money, which I get. Yeah. But you know what? A lot of these loans are government backed. So, yeah.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day. So, anyway.
Yeah. But I know this next topic I really want to let you describe. Because,
I love this.
And this is underwriting. As a phrase you're going to hear a ton if you are in the process of buying a house and getting a mortgage. You're going to hear underwriting a lot.
Yeah. We blame the underwriters for everything. They are the secret demons
everything
of the mortgage industry.
It is their fault.
So I apologize to any of our underwriting friends out there. This is not you specifically, but we do, like, when I talk to my clients, they're like, so tell me about the loan process. I'm like, well, you're going to submit all these documents, blah, 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 blah.
Several times, probably.
Several times. I said, and then the underwriters. They're like, who are the underwriters? Dum, dum, dum. They're the trolls that live under the bridge in the back room of a mortgage office that don't get fed. They're not exposed to light, and they're very crazy.
There's no windows in the room.
There's no windows.
Sure, there's
no windows.
Probably no cell phone service either.
No,
we can never seem to actually talk to these people.
And they haven't had sugar in eons.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah,
caffeine either,
no,
probably.
No caffeine.
None.
And they are just like they are kept awake with very loud heavy metal music.
Okay. But what do they really do, Jamie?
So what they really do is they're really the fact checkers, right? They go through all the loans. They're checking for compliance.
All the paperwork.
There's a lot of government compliance that comes the CPFB, right, has all these compliance things that have to go with the loans that are packaged up and sold, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Those and the underwriters are making sure that they are giving legit loans to people with legit business. This is how much money I make. This is how much money I have in assets, and they're confirming all that. They are the ones who come out of left field asking you for a document from when you were in 7th grade.
And they want it like notarized.
Yes, and notarized, yes.
Your blood and your fingerprint there.
And a first tooth of your firstborn child.
Probably.
Yes.
Everything. But I mean, they do good work because we want to make sure that there's no fraudulent things going on because in the end, that just hurts all of us.
Exactly. Their purpose is good. They're good-hearted. It just...
Can be a little frustrating to work with.
They're the demons of the lending industry. I'm sorry. So... Anyhow.
Sorry, guys. We do love you. I'm sorry.
Enough about our underwriting troll friends. Let's talk about DTI.
Ooh, debt to income.
Yes.
Lenders are going to talk about this a whole ton, too.
It's one of their favorite terms.
Yeah. So debt to income is, I think this one might be a little more self-explanatory.
Right.
But they're literally looking at all of your debt.
Mm-hmm. And your income.
And then all of your income. And they're using that to help calculate your risk.
And you really want to be under 50%.
Yes.
Like
the lower the better.
The lower the better.
Yeah.
And that's it. The DTI is important. So when we tell you, like, don't put anything else on a credit card, or don't
go buy new furniture or a new car, or
don't buy a new car.
Don't go buy anything.
Unless you're really mad at them, then tell them to go out and buy a new car. No. Unless they worked with another realtor.
We would never do that. Kidding. Because the underwriting trolls would find us.
Underwriting trolls would find us. But you just want to make sure that you keep your debt ratio low.
Yeah.
So let's talk about liens. So there's good liens and bad liens, and a mortgage is technically a good lien. On your credit report, it is a good lien.
Yeah.
But a lien is what?
I mean, it's like a legal claim, a legal statement, right? Mm-hmm. A legal claim to something, an asset that has some sort of value, right?
Yep. So, and that's basically it. So whenever you buy a home or a car or some big ticket item that you are financing, they hold that as collateral. Not physically, obviously, but in the case of your home, they're holding the deed. So you get the deed, but you don't actually get the deed. Somebody else's name is on that deed too, and it's the lender.
Yeah, or some random dude that you don't know.
It's the random dude that you never want to meet, because that means that you did not pay your
Something
mortgage.
did not go right if you meet that person.
So basically, and if your loan obligation is not satisfied, they can take your property from you.
Yeah, it's how they protect themselves. Right?
As my favorite title person says, you pay, you stay.
So I think I might have the same title person. I've heard that saying before.
You pay, you stay. So at any rate, so that's liens. So there's good liens and bad liens.
Yeah.
There's also tax liens. Oh. Tax liens are bad liens.
Those are bad liens.
Bad liens. Mechanics liens.
Bad
liens. There's all kinds of liens that can be put on your property, and it would be on your property specifically. Yeah. You don't want those kind of liens. Those are bad liens. Mortgage liens are fine. I mean, they're not viewed bad. But they are things that if you're planning to sell your home, you need to be very honest with us in letting us know what liens you have on your property that you are aware of.
Because we will find out eventually.
It will come out. Like, it's not like you're going to get away with something. I promise that's not going to happen. So it'll just get caught at the last minute, and it will really mess up your transaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me what LTV is.
Loan to value. This is another one kind of like DTI, right? It's a little easier to figure out. So it's just the ratio, doing a little bit of math too, of like what the property valuation is versus like your loan amount.
Mm-hmm. And typically they won't lend more than 80%.
Yeah.
So now in the case of VA loans,
it's 100.
They will do 100%. Well, I shouldn't say they won't loan more than 80%. 80% is really for HELOCs that you have to be under for HELOCs.
If you're under that 80, that's when you get into like a PMI kind of territory.
Yeah, exactly.
You might have to pay a little
extra
for insurance.
Yeah. So really, they're just looking at the value based against how much money you owe on it.
Yeah,
that's all that is.
The higher that ratio is, the more risk that the lender sees.
Yep. Now let's talk about some fees.
Oh, lenders, sometimes they like fees.
There's fees. Well, I mean, everybody needs to pay the bills.
Everybody gets to pay, right?
And which, by the way, I'm going to do a future episode on everybody who benefits from a real estate transaction. Yeah. Which is, it's actually kind of cool, and I'm not going to get into it right here too long, but
Don't
just
give all the cookies away.
As a teaser, there's a reason that real estate is so important for our economy, and I'm excited to kind of talk about that. But let's talk about the origination fee.
Yeah, so this is really just what the lender is charging you to do the work to actually get everything together and service your loan.
Which, is a lot of work on their part.
I mean, when they ask you for that same piece of paper 6 times, it's a lot of work.
It is.
No, but that's a knock at all. Our lender friends are going to be very upset with us after this episode.
Not at all. They know I say that. They know I say that all the time.
These fees can vary based on the lender that you're working with. Everybody structures things a little differently there.
And when you are comparing lenders, first and foremost, find a lender that you're comfortable with. Yes. Like, you just want to make sure you can talk to them, that you're telling them everything, that they're working with you in your best interest to find you the best product for you. Yes. But if you really want to get down to nuts and bolts and you're comparing things, make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Yeah. Because a lot of times what I see happen is that
interest, not APR to APR.
APRs and interest rates and even origination fees and all those other fees, they get all thrown around and mixed up in a blender. and you're just hearing, you just focus on interest rate.
1%, yeah.
And I'm like, stop. You have to look at the whole thing. You have to look at literally how much money you have to bring to the table and what's your monthly payment going to be. Because that's really all that's important.
Because sometimes that interest rate is lower because they're charging you.
Yeah, because they're charging you more up front.
To buy that rate down.
So you just need to know, and you need to be able to make that determination.
Most definitely. All right, so this next one. This is the one that sometimes at the closing table is really sad. And I'm like, don't look at it.
And it's like 15 pages long. Yeah, just don't look at it. But your amortization schedule.
Yeah.
Basically, all it is a very long table, 15 pages, not joking.
It shows you literally every payment and
for 30 years.
Split of that, of what's interest and what's actual principal.
And the problem is they are forced to print that out and give it to you and kill a tree in the process. And the minute you pay 1 penny difference, if you pay 1 more penny towards principal, that whole amortization schedule's thrown off. You just rip it up and throw it away. Yeah. So just skip it. Just sit. Yep, there it is.
Makes you a little sad too.
Initial the back page. Don't look at it.
Moving.
Just move it. Move it along. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about assessed value and appraised value.
Yeah, because these two I feel like can be really confusing from the consumer's perspective. Like, what's the difference between the assessed value and then the appraised value, and why is there 2 values?
Yeah, and another little teaser. We're going to do another episode talking about home values and where they come from, and we're going to talk about assessed values, appraised values, more and market values,
which is a third variable.
Yeah. Anyhow, so assessed value. What's that?
I mean, that is just quite literally what the government, the county, thinks it's worth.
Yeah, and that's what they're taxing you on.
Yeah.
So here's the deal: unless you want to get taxed more money, don't argue. If
you don't want that to be
you don't want that number to be high. You want that to be as low as possible. You want to be like, what? That house? That's only worth like $10. That's a piece of shit. I only want to. Nope. Yeah, I shouldn't be worth more than $10. I mean, honestly, you want it to be low. That's good because you're paying less taxes.
Yeah.
Appraised value, however.
All right, well, that's the different number, and that's what the bank thinks it's worth.
That's what the bank thinks it's worth.
And the problem with these appraised values, kind of like a lot of these values, is
it's one person's opinion.
It's a little subjective
on that day at that time, based on stuff. I mean, it's not like they didn't just wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, I think that's how much this house is worth." But
sometimes I feel that way.
Sometimes you do, right? But they are definitely. It is a value, and you can challenge it. And like I said, we have a whole other podcast on this, so we'll skip over that.
Yeah. Well, the next one. These are 2 names that we hear like
all the time
together
in the news. You hear these names all the time.
You'll hear Fannie and Freddie.
Fannie and Freddie.
Who the heck are Fannie? Are they people? They're not people, right?
No, I don't think so. Were they named after?
Maybe we need to do the history of the nations. Next new episode idea.
There's Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac.
Yeah, Fannie was here first.
Fannie was here first. And they're both entities that were chartered by the U.S. government in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Fannie's been around since 1938, and Freddie since 1970. So Freddie's a little newer. Freddie Mercury, I always think Queen, 70s. So maybe that's why they named. I don't know. But
now I'm going to forever relate those 2 together.
I think you should.
I never put that together. Now I'm going to think of Freddie Mercury all the time. But yeah, I mean, Fannie Mae, right? They basically, usually in bulk, they purchase mortgages from these lenders, and that allows the lenders to keep issuing new loans and lending money out, and they usually do it like in bulk, and they scoop them all up.
Yeah, and let's just touch a little bit on what are these mortgages in general. So, and this also goes back to a little bit of what happened back in 2008 when we had all the weirdness was going on. We don't need to get into that, but and that was all lending things. That was unscrupulous lending. We've gotten rid of that with a lot of regulations. But what they do is these entities lend out millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they're kind of lent out to the mortgage companies. The mortgage companies originate these loans, so they go through, and that's the underwriters making sure that everything checks, right? The trolls. But and then once the loan is funded and you have your keys and you're in your house, then those mortgage companies, they need more money, right? They only get so much money and they can only lend so much money. So now they have to package those all back up again, and they have to sell them to a servicer.
Yeah, and that's why those underwriting folks, we won't call them that word anymore. Those underwriting folks are so particular because they need to make sure that those loans that they have dotted every I and crossed every T.
They have to go through audits. Yeah,
and they get audited, and when they bunch them all together, Fannie's checking.
Fannie is checking. Yeah, and so is Freddie, that jerk.
Yeah,
but they are both basically government entities that are federally backing these loans and allow the money. Now they're both shareholder. They're both shareholder owned companies now,
which is interesting.
It is interesting because it's still a government entity.
But also,
this goes beyond my pay grade.
Yeah.
I can't really get into the deeper explanation.
But it sounds like maybe a future episode where we'll bring an expert in to talk about that.
That'd be interesting. Yeah. So anyhow, so those were our, let's see, where were we on? That's how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 terms you just learned.
I should have numbered
just
these.
under mortgage. So we have a couple other things going on. So let's talk about titles.
Oh, yeah. Title is fun. So there's 2 words in title that I feel like we hear a whole heck of a lot. Mm-hmm. And before I was in the industry, I didn't exactly understand what the difference was between the two. But the first one was a deed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all I remember hearing is, well, you'll sign the deed.
Yeah.
And then they'll take the deed to the courthouse. And I'm thinking, is this like a scroll? Like,
yeah,
what does this look like?
Back in the old timey days where they all they made proclamations.
I mean, maybe I just wanted that the first time I bought a house. I think that would have been kind of cool. But it's really just quite literally a piece of paper. I'm sorry, it's just a piece of paper.
It's just white piece of paper.
It's legal size though, if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, whatever.
It's better.
It's not very exciting.
But it's just a piece of paper that is what actually...
It does have a stamp on it.
There's a cool stamp. But it just transfers ownership from one party to another party. That's pretty much it. But it has all the nuts and bolts in there too.
It does. And sometimes it has deed restrictions in it.
Yes.
And I will tell you, up until recently in the state of Virginia, we had some pretty nasty deed restrictions.
Oh, tell me more.
So I'm sure you're all aware of fair housing and the horrible, horrible things that our federal government did to particularly people of color. And there were actual deed restrictions that when you sold a piece of property, it went with a restriction on it that said it was not allowed to be owned by a black person. Now, what's interesting is when the laws changed, and I know I go through fair housing all the time, and I should be able to quote the exact law for Virginia, but back, the laws changed a long time ago.
A long time ago.
I mean, to be clear,
not
in the history of things, not that long ago, but they've changed and they allowed for ownership to take place, but they never removed that language from the deed. It's just that the federal government was able, the laws superseded what the language in the deed was. Well, the attorneys were not allowed to remove the language either. So these deeds, can you imagine?
Just kept
being
getting
a black person and saving up all your money and buying a home and literally getting a piece of paper that said that according to the deed restriction that you weren't allowed to own it. Like, I'm sorry, this is a horrible piece of American history. And if you ever think that the powers that be have not done things to hold certain people back, then you are sadly mistaken and you need to learn more about it. But up until recently, and I want to say it was, I'm not even 100% sure on this. I want to say it's like within the past 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, that whole COVID thing, it's those 2 years. I'm never sure what's before or after COVID, pre or post-COVID.
Pre-COVID or post-COVID.
But they have finally been allowed to actually remove that language out of deeds. But anyhow, deed restrictions can have other things, like this can only be used as parkland, or you can't build, or like there are certain deed restrictions that can convey with a deed. So
fair enough.
Sorry.
So yeah, well, now we've had some dark history of.
Hey, unfortunately, that is American history.
But you know what? That's hopefully how we learn and grow and get better here. But that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the piece of paper that transfers ownerships. Like Jamie said, there can be some restrictions. It gets filed at the courthouse, wherever your local courthouse is. And usually, when you're dealing with a real estate transaction, the title and settlement company, or if you're using a real estate attorney.
Yeah. So we're a title state.
Mm-hmm.
if you are in an attorney state like New York, they're an attorney state, so the attorneys handle this a little bit different.
Yeah, but they will be the ones who get all this paperwork drafted up, make sure everybody signs in the appropriate place, and make sure it gets notarized and recorded with the courthouse for you.
Because the government wants to know whose tax money to collect.
They want to know who to call and who to shake down for their money. So the other word that gets used a lot.
You know, I want to tell another little quick story. So, you know, if you want to talk about American history, and I am not going to claim to be a history expert, but I know enough things that really irritate me sometimes. You know, a lot of our laws and things were based on being a landowner. So your rights way back when they wrote up the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution,
way back,
voting. Well, again, in the scheme of things, not that far back.
A couple hundred years,
not that bad. But they, a lot of rights were only given to landowners. So these deeds and these titles were very important at the time, and they gave you additional abilities to vote. That's also why making sure that all people could own land. What we want to strive to do is allow for everybody to own land. I mean, you need to be able to afford it, but we need to help you with that too. But you should be able to own land. Women, you know, for a long time weren't allowed to own land.
Yeah,
people of color. I mean, there's all sorts of things that were restricted. And that was all a lot of what our government was, the Constitution was written to support. So it's like kind of freaky when you think about how much we fight about not changing the Constitution. I'm like, well, really?
Maybe we had flawed logic back then.
Maybe we need to change it a little bit more. But
some change in those couple hundred years, right?
Yeah. Anyhow, this is not a constitutional scholarship.
Will be a separate branch off here.
Podcast, yes. Anyhow, title.
Title. So the next one we hear a lot is title, and that kind of it's like a twofer. I feel like you hear title, but also just as much you hear title search said all the time. Especially if you're in the process of buying or selling a home, you're going to hear that phrase a whole heck of a lot. Title is really just it's the history of the claims against the property of who's had rights to it, who's had the right to own, use, and control and that property. It has all the prior transfers, all the information in there, and then that search is when your real estate attorney or your title and settlement company will actually go back and look through that history and make sure that everything is checking up, that there is no I don't know if we included clouds on here.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're not going to get too far down into the title.
But they want to make sure that there are no judgments or no liens against the property that need to be taken care of in order to transfer ownership.
Because that would need to be paid off with the transfer of ownership.
Yeah.
So
the good liens or the bad liens that we talked about, all the liens attached to that property have got to be paid off.
That's why you need to tell people if there's liens.
Yeah, because they will find out.
They will find out during the title search.
And it will be a very uncomfortable and
very
bad
uncomfortable
situation.
Conversation. Yeah. So escrow. Escrow happens when we open escrow when.
Yeah, so we open escrow when we go under contract, right? It's exciting.
Right. And that, I'm going to jump ahead because escrow, well, let's talk about what escrow is real quick, which is really just, it's kind of like an account.
I think the premise behind it is just that it's someone who is like a third party who isn't directly involved with the transaction. Like they don't have a financial interest.
And they're holding the money and they're doing the paperwork in between there. And that's where our EMD goes. Our EMD. Which is, it's the earnest money deposit. So this is the first time after you put an offer in on a property that you're going to write a check. I say it for proverbial write a check. You could deposit it electronically or whatever.
I think most people wire to say that.
But it's the first time you are going to start paying for that house that you don't have yet.
Yeah. And I feel like back in the day, I don't hear it quite as much, but it was often referred to like as your good faith deposit.
Yes, the good faith money, good faith deposit. And that is what goes into escrow. That money is held in escrow. And that is released at settlement to either be applied towards your settlement costs, or it is released as a result of certain contingencies that, and we'll talk about in a second.
Maybe somebody didn't perform the way they're supposed to.
Somebody didn't do something
bad.
Yes. So that's escrow and EMD. Let's see. Another term that we run into when you get to closing is ALTA.
Yeah.
Or HUD-1.
Yes.
We also hear it called the HUD-1. HUD-1 is old school.
It's
cash.
Yeah.
Or
cash.
cash.
Yeah.
The ALTA is the new school, we say. It's not really that new anymore. That's really...
I was like, it's been a while.
It's like 10 years.
Yeah.
I really need to let
Most
it go.
of my career,
yeah.
it's been ALTA.
Okay, whatever.
A year, maybe I was using a HUD.
So, yeah. And ALTA is basically, it's just a different way of putting the numbers on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Because the government likes you to have numbers in many different forms.
Yes, so I mean, it will be duplicates, but it is, well, you just realized a term we didn't discuss in the lending situation was closing disclosure, I was going to say.
Yeah, CD,
so this is like a bonus one. We're not going to include it.
Yeah.
CD, closing disclosure.
So I guess we need to say 42 terms.
42 with a little star
yeah.
on there. We'll add that note in. But the ALTA is going to be the same numbers that the buyer sees, but it has the seller's financials on it too. And it just stands for the American Land Title Association, which is just a trade association that does title insurance. And they're actually headquartered right in our neck of the woods.
Yep. Everything's headquartered in our neck of the woods.
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. At any rate, so yes. So you'll get your ALTA settlement, and it spells out all your numbers.
Yeah, all the details.
Now these are kind of like related, unrelated, so they're just things that you may hear coming up at settlements.
Yeah, and the title people.
Title people.
We're gonna have some questions maybe about this stuff.
So tell me what an easement is. Often we run into easements and we see them on what? On plat map?
Yeah. We do, actually. The first property...
We should put plat map on here.
I know, all of these 43. We're just going to have to keep adding to it.
Okay.
It'll just continue part 1, part 2, part 3. The first property we bought here had a utility easement on it. So we got to learn all sorts of fun about that. So
they could just truck onto your land at any time to take care of that utility issue.
Yep. So basically an easement is just some other, like, entity usually that has the right or interest in the land where they can come do something for a specific purpose, a very specific purpose.
Yes.
And utility easements are ones that
they're pretty common.
We see pretty commonly. So in our situation, the utility company had an easement on the property, which just meant that they could come onto the property anytime. They never did the entire 6 years we were there, but it did mean
or when they did, they snuck on in the depth of night.
That is true. But it did mean that when we put a fence in, the county wouldn't allow us to put a standard fence in. Yeah. We had to put one in with drop pins so that the easement company could drive a truck into our backyard if they needed to. And thankfully, they never had to do that.
Yeah. And you'll see storm drain easements.
That's it. Yeah.
You see, sometimes you see driveway easements on like weird plots of land where your neighbor actually needs to use part of your land
of your driveway to get
as
in,
access. Those are easements. Those are probably the most common ones. I'm sure there's like a million others, but those are the most common ones we see. And then we hear these, there's 3 Tenancy, there's 3 tenancy terms that we hear.
Which really just means like how you own the property, right? So the 3 terms that we hear pretty common are joint tenancy. Then we hear, now see, it sounds like Tennessee when I say it.
See, right?
Tenancy in common, and tenancy by the entirety. So joint tenancies is where there's 2 or more people who hold real estate property jointly, and their survivors take full ownership of the property in the event something happens.
Typically married couples.
Yeah, typically this is a married couple that we see. So if we were married and owned a property together, something happened to me, then just automatically
I would be really sad.
She would be super sad, but she'd also have full ownership.
I would have
of the
whole
house.
property. Yes, the house is mine.
So hopefully she wasn't having a party like that, but yes, the house.
Oh yeah, no, I'd be very sad.
Yeah, that is a better reaction. Thank you. So the next one is tenancy in common. Yes. So this is where 2 or more people, again, they have equal rights in possession of the property without any rights of survivorship.
Right.
So that means if we own a property tenancy in common and then I pass away, she might not be dancing as excitedly.
So I may have to get out.
I mean, it could be awkward.
I mean, sometimes that property could inherit to a child or some other family
somebody
member.
Else can take their portion of it.
An animal sanctuary, perhaps. Anyhow.
And then, really nice.
And then the entirety, tenancy by the entirety is also that's the married persons. Wait. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Tenancy by the entirety is typically for a married couple. It's just 2 people. Yeah. Joint tenancy is where you don't have to be married. Yeah. Just be,
we're not married.
Yeah.
So that works.
We're just friends and we bought a house together and then I die and then she celebrates.
Yeah.
Apparently.
No. I said I was sad.
And then she celebrated.
I did. I celebrated the house.
Well, celebrate life. I'm okay with that.
That's right. Okay. Yes. And tenancy in the entirety is typically your married couples.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have some just generalized real estate terms that aren't directly related to anything that we've talked about so far, but that come up pretty frequently when talking about real estate.
Yeah.
So the first one...
By the way, we're almost done. We only... These are 4 terms left.
This is
4.
Wild. So
out of our 43.
Is it 40, 44? I don't know.
I forget how many.
We might have to go back and count at the end. Yeah. But the first one, I'm going to skip a little bit and start with CMA. What is CMA, Jamie?
Oh, it is a comparative market analysis. A comparative market analysis. That's what you give.
What the heck does that mean?
That's say you're like, I want to sell my house. And I'm like, that's great. How much do you think it's worth? And you're like, $1 million. And I'm like, let me pull up a CMA.
Let me tell you.
And tell you what it's worth. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into our different value properties. But a CMA is a comparative market analysis, and it is done by your realtor to determine the value of your home. It's typically your market value of your home. Yes. It's using recent sale comparables. Yeah. And we use like properties, similar aged properties, whatnot.
Yeah, we want a really good idea of what we think fair market value for that property will be. And, we have to a little bit think like an appraiser too. Because, that bank is going to care what the appraiser says.
And this is really important. If you are selling your home and you are interviewing listing agents, A, you should be getting a CMA from them. Yes. B, the number they give you that they say they can sell your house for should be supported by the CMA.
By the data behind it.
Because I have seen a lot of people that are like, I can sell your house for $1 million. And I'm like, but the CMA says that's worth $850. Yeah. But unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Seller are like,
$1 million?
$1 million, we'll sign up. And then what happens is it sits, and then a month later, that listing agent is like, oh, we're going to have to do a price drop to like $900,000. And, whatever. It goes from there. Anyhow, make sure that the data supports the number that you've been given.
Yes, most definitely.
Okay. What else do we got?
Well, we also have contingencies.
Contingencies.
And there's a whole lot of contingencies.
We could have a whole episode on contingencies.
Like a whole episode on contingencies. But
in a nutshell, the importance about a contingency is that that's what protects your EMD, your earnest money deposits, right? That protects that money, and it keeps it your money. As long as you have a contingency in place, those can be home inspection contingencies, those can be HOA document reviews, those can be
some sort of conditions or
some
things
condition
that have to happen.
That is part of your contract. That's what protects that money. If you have no protections left, you could potentially lose that money if you were to default on that contract. If you pull out for some reason, decide at the last minute that that's not your home, you lose that money. Yeah. Or if you don't qualify for something after you're...
Yeah, and you don't have any protection to get out. So contingencies, for the most part, not completely, they're add-ons. They're not like an automatically included thing. Yeah. So it's an extra layer of protection that is added to protect you as the consumer.
100%. Yep. Then we have closing costs. Oh. So you're getting, this is the lump fee.
Everything.
All the monies. So you have your down payment. Your down payment is not your closing cost. Your down payment is just whatever percent your lender and you have agreed to put down on your loan. That 3, 5, 10, 20%, whatever
that percentage is. Yep.
That's your down payment.
And then on top of that.
And on top of that is your closing costs. Around here, I see it's typically 2.5 to 3%.
Sure, yeah.
It really depends on what time of the month you're closing, whether it's in an HOA or condo associations, if those big fees attached, if you're prepaying a lot of mortgage up front,
your loan structure, everything. Yeah. There's a lot of things that go into it.
But that is typically, I say, for budgeting purposes, assume 3%. If it's less, great, but 3% is going to be
budget for the worst.
Yeah,
makes me feel better that way.
So if you're doing a 20% down payment, you have to come with 23% to your settlement because you have your closing costs.
But don't worry, you will get a copy of that closing disclosure or ALTA statement ahead of time, so you know exactly how much money to spend.
Yeah. And frankly, a good agent is going to give you an estimate. Yeah. Also, it's not a loan estimate, which is what the lender gives you. But what we're giving you is, it's not going to be exact, but it's going to be pretty close. It's a rough estimate to give you an idea of how much money you're going to need to bring to settlement with you. So, and then right before, this is actually fun.
This is like the happy one.
It's the happy one.
Generally, the happy one.
So we actually probably should have done this before we got into the contingency and the closing costs because it's in order. But before you go to settlement, we get to do our final walkthrough.
Yay!
tell me about a final walkthrough.
Yeah, so final walkthrough happens usually just right before closing, and that time period can vary based on a lot of factors, but generally, at least in my practice, it's usually a day or two.
Yeah.
I try to avoid same day because
Yeah.
I don't like last minute issues. It's very stressful, so I try to go at least the day before. But it's basically to make sure that the property is in the condition that
substantially
the same
condition. That's a very important term.
Yeah, that it was supposed to be contractually, whatever that stipulation was in the contract. So we're basically just going to make sure that there's no big holes in the wall, nothing
they didn't
crazy.
run off with the appliances.
Yeah. Or, if there were holes in the wall before, then the holes will still be there. But we want to make sure that nothing wild happened to the house and that it's substantially in the same condition as what we're expecting it to be in.
Yeah. So that was our 4,872 words
Terms.
you need to know. I think we left off at 43, 44
ish. We'll count
ish.
We'll,
But anyhow, thank you for joining us. We hope you come back and join us for our next episode. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them below.
There's going to be something here.
There is. Yeah, we're pointing down at something that doesn't really exist yet. But yes, please follow us online and say nice things about us and share us with your friends and family. And as always, don't forget to spay and neuter your pets. Thanks so much.